Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're starting what might wind up being the wildest trek in the Philosophy and Ethics series as we start our breakdown of Grand Theft Auto V. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Grand Theft Auto V was initially released on consoles in September of 2013, with an eventual PC release coming a year and a half later in April of 2015. I've been looking forward to covering this game for a while because, despite the over-the-top parody of LA and major exaggerations of real-world problems that many of us face on a daily basis, the game presents some amazing opportunities to discuss ethics and morality in a way that I haven't really had the chance to talk about it in this series. A lot of the games that we've covered have been post-apocalyptic, like The Walking Dead and Fallout 4, or leaning more into supernatural elements like in The Wolf Among Us or The Quarry. And even the games that haven't done that directly were more personal, a la Life is Strange, or they took us into a potential future like in Detroit Become Human, or into the past like in Red Dead Redemption 2. This is the first game in the Philosophy and Ethics series that's actually kind of grounded in a sense of modern reality, with the game's depiction of LA, Los Santos, being built and shown in a way that could almost make it believable in the real world. My basic plan is to cover the story of the game over the next few weeks, honing in on themes and interesting discussions that bring the world of the game into our world to allow us to use the scenarios in the game as thought experiments to try and learn from. This isn't really all that different from the normal Philosophy and Ethics series, but as we're stepping into 2026 and moving forward on the channel, I want to be a little more deliberate with how I approach these videos, as I think the message often gets lost in the lore. So, with that out of the way, let's rev our engines and drive headlong into the wild world of Los Santos. Along the beautiful shores on the western edge of the city is where we begin, falling in with one of the three-player protagonists we'll be following, Franklin Clinton. Franklin is joined by his buddy Lamar, and the two are searching for a pair of cars they've been sent to repossess. They're not really sure where to look for the cars, but with the help of one Michael Townley, who we'll be catching back up with shortly, they manage to find and take back the vehicles. Franklin works for a man named Simeon Yetarian, a used car salesman who likes to take advantage of people, ripping them off with impossible interest rates and sending hired people to repossess the vehicles, sometimes even before the first payment is due. It's not really the kind of work that most people would want to be involved with, but when the options are limited, you do what you have to, and Franklin doesn't really feel like he has many options. Let's take a minute to talk about Simeon, though, because his business model isn't really that far off base from something that you might see in a larger city in America. He takes advantage of people who likely can't get financing for a vehicle anywhere else, likely using a buy here, pay here model of financing that allows him to set the terms of the loans and decide how to handle people who default. It's a shady business model, but one that has taken hold in many different forms over the history of the United States. Back in the day, Simeon might have been a loan shark, someone who offered high interest rate loans to desperate individuals with very steep penalties for those who couldn't or wouldn't pay them back on time. Typically, these kind of underground financing options become prevalent in places where the overall system has failed people. If jobs are scarce or non-existent, or those jobs don't pay enough to make ends meet for the average person, alternative means of acquiring cash crop up to fill the need. More modern concepts of this kind of thing include the aforementioned buy here, pay here kind of establishments, selling things like cars, furniture, appliances, and electronics, as well as short-term lenders known as payday loan businesses. These companies operate in areas where people are less likely to be able to get credit for bigger purchases, and they take advantage of people in numerous ways. And above the economic factors, these kind of establishments show a flaw in the system of using credit to buy pretty much everything you can imagine. We've built a society on the idea of using credit for day-to-day purchases like gas, groceries, household goods, and even small individual purchases that really should be made with cash. It's not a new system, as the idea of using credit to purchase goods and services goes back to at least 1600 BCE. But in the past century or so, it's gotten way more sophisticated and has been abused by people to both their benefit and detriment. Coming back into the world of Franklin and Lamar, Simeon is one of those people who is abusing the system. But that will come back to bite him shortly. Even in this first mission, we find that it doesn't take long for the cars that we were supposedly repossessing to be reported stolen, and we have to escape the law before we can return the cars to the dealership. If this whole thing was as legal as we are led to believe, we should be able to just show whatever documentation we have to the police and go on our merry way. But that kind of raises another question about the ethicality of what we're doing. Even if the act of repossessing the cars is legal, a gray area in this case at best, it could be argued that the act of taking back the cars in lieu of the debt is just as dubious ethically. Let's be real, I doubt anyone is going to shed a tear over the likely wealthy individual that we took the cars back from losing their slick ride. But what about if the debtor was a single mom just trying to make ends meet? On the face of it, it might be easy to say that, well, she just should have been responsible and paid off the loan. But life is never that easy. For a lot of people, a car is necessary to get around. They need a reliable means to get to work, school, doctor's appointments, the grocery store, and very often the little money they have doesn't cover their basic needs, let alone extras like a car payment. Then you have people like Simeon who take advantage of the fact that these people, who've been shunted aside in the system, aren't able to get a normal loan for a reliable car with a decent payment. Maybe they don't have the money for a down payment, or past mistakes and struggles make it impossible for them to get a conventional loan. The Buy Here Pay Here shop offers a chance at a vehicle, with the true cost hidden in the fine print. There's higher maintenance costs, higher interest rates, leading to a higher payment, and the first time an emergency happens, the buyer has to choose between making a payment or putting food on the table and falling behind, incurring more fees, and the cycle repeats. We'll get more into how poverty impacts us all as we dig further into the game, but just in this first mission, we can already see where the story is going. Now, Franklin isn't exactly poor, but he isn't rich either. He's kind of stuck somewhere in the middle, where many of us fall, having just enough to get by but hoping for what is known as the American dream. This idea of not just having your needs met, but being able to afford things like nice cars and regular vacations. He lives in a house in the middle of the city with his aunt, a house that they both own thanks to the passing of Franklin's grandmother. And he has a pretty nice car. All things considered, he doesn't have it too bad, but he's wanting more. After performing another repo mission with Lamar and filling in for a friend of his as a tow truck driver, Franklin finds himself heading out to recover a vehicle that we actually saw Simeon in the process of selling as we returned to the first cars that we stole back. It's barely been off the lot for a couple of days, and while it doesn't seem at all above board, if Franklin wants to keep his job, he's got to repo the car. But this mission turns out to be much more than just a simple repossession. Sneaking into a really nice house, Franklin manages to recover the car without being seen and starts making his way back to the lot. He's only a couple of miles down the road, however, when he finds himself at the end of a gun when a man in the back seat pops up to threaten him for stealing the car. That man is the guy from the beginning of the video, Michael Townley. Michael isn't messing around, and it's clear he isn't afraid to get his hands dirty as he instructs Franklin to drive the car through the window of the showroom before beating the crap out of Simeon. This whole thing winds up costing Franklin his job, but when one door closes, another opens. During the drive from Michael's house to the car lot, Michael made a suggestion that he and Franklin could share a drink sometime so that he could explain to the young man how the world really works. And Franklin winds up taking him up on the offer. It's actually kind of a funny situation because Michael didn't really mean it, and he's kind of shocked to see Franklin show up in his backyard one bright afternoon a couple of days later. Many of us have likely, at one time or another in our lives, suggested grabbing a drink or a meal with someone that we barely knew as a courtesy, knowing that offer would never really be redeemed. Franklin took it seriously, though, and I can't help but chuckle every time I see him pop into Michael's field of view as Phil Collins sings the Aging Criminals theme song in the background. Franklin recognizes that Michael has some wisdom, or at least a little knowledge to offer, and possibly some connections that could prove useful. He isn't wrong for seeking out the man's help, but as is always the case when it comes to these kind of situations, he needs to be careful. At this point, he doesn't know much about Michael, and he's still trying to figure things out for himself. When you're young, it's sometimes tempting to latch onto older, mentor-like figures and try to emulate the success they appear to have had. But that success always comes at a price, and most of us miss that bit when we're young. It's easy to say that we know the things that we want are locked behind hard work and sacrifice, but few are actually willing to make the sacrifices they need to make to get there. At the same time, people like Michael, who've more or less made it, tend to forget the struggles they went through and typically ignore the breaks that they got along the way. They like to hand out advice, and they especially like it when younger people come looking for it, but that advice seldom holds the full truth. Michael can teach Franklin a lot about how he got where he got, but he can't hand him the luck that got him there, and Franklin's road is going to be a lot different than Michael's. As the two are talking, Michael's son, Jimmy, calls him to say that he's trapped in their yacht, which has been stolen and is currently being towed down the freeway. A chase ensues, and Franklin shows Michael what he's capable of as he jumps from the moving car onto the boat and saves Jimmy before the car's engine dies and things settle down. The pair separate, with Franklin taking charge of getting the car repaired and driving Jimmy home, but that whole debacle quickly fades into a distant memory the next time that Franklin visits Michael's house, as he's greeted by a man jumping out of the second-story window. It turns out Michael's wife has been cheating on him with her tennis coach, and after catching them in the act, Michael chases the man outside just as Franklin is walking up. Jumping in a work truck parked in the driveway, the pair go after the man, which is just about the dumbest thing they could have done. Look, infidelity is a pretty serious thing to most people. Romantic relationships require trust, and when that trust is broken in such a blatant way, tensions get high and people lose their temper. I get it. But there is never anything positive that comes out of these kind of interactions. The very best thing you can do when you wind up on the bad end of this kind of situation is walk away, gather your thoughts, and move forward. What that looks like for different people will vary, but making decisions about what actions to take in a heated moment is usually a bad idea, and you can actually wind up making the situation much worse by losing your temper. This is just a generally good rule to live by, but it's especially important when you've been hurt or feel that you've been wronged. We're all guilty from time to time of letting our pride get to us, and getting mad even when it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if you can learn to control your anger and deal with your emotions in a healthier way, you'll actually be happier in the long run. Michael isn't there yet, though, and he finally catches up to the tennis instructor, who seems like a real jackass either way, as he's hiding up high on a porch overlooking the city. The rational thing to do here might be to have some words with the guy, and if he absolutely can't help himself, they might wind up in a fist fight or something. But rationality flew out the window when we started this whole thing. Using the winch on the back of the truck, Michael and Franklin pull the porch off the house, sending it careening down the hill and giving Michael a little bit of relief in the short term. That relief is extremely short-lived, however. As it turns out, the house didn't belong to the tennis instructor, but rather a man named Martin Madrazo. Mr. Madrazo is apparently, well, I'll just let Franklin fill us in.
Man, Mr. Madrazo is a legitimate businessman who was wrongfully accused of running a Mexican-American gang and a narcotic ring, but the charges were dropped because of the witnesses came up missing.
Smart kid.
So, he's a drug lord that we apparently don't want to mess with, and we've just pulled his house down a hill. As recompense, he says we need to provide $2.5 million to rebuild the mansion. And now Michael and Franklin find themselves in a tight spot. Coming up with that kind of money won't be easy, but it might just be possible with the help of an old buddy of Michael's that we'll meet in the next episode. To make sure you don't miss out on that, like this video and subscribe to Lost in Games. I release new philosophy and ethics in games videos each week, and you're not going to want to miss what I've got planned for this year. If you want to help me fund things like rebuilding Martin Madrazo's house, I've got a Patreon and channel memberships where chipping in just a couple of dollars a week gets you cool things like your name in videos and early access to content. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.